The pen tapped on the walnut table as my son told me I was being removed, his wife already taking notes like I was history. As I rested my hand on the chair, I kept my voice calm and let them finish rehearsing my exit. While that tapping echoed through the glass room, the shock drained away and left something colder behind. The same sound followed my thoughts as I realized this wasn't about leadership, it was about handing my work to her. That's when I understood they didn't just want me gone. They wanted my system. Still listening to that pen, I decided their $8 million dream would collapse on the code they never knew I controlled. We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence. It lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The call came through my assistant's line, though she wasn't my assistant anymore. Not really. Not with the way people had started lowering their voices when I passed. "Mrs. Mitchell," she said, careful and soft. "Matthew asked if you could come up to the executive conference room. Now." The executive conference room sat on the top floor like a crown. Glass walls, a walnut table polished to a mirror, Miami's skyline spread out like something I'd earned. That view used to steady me. That morning, it felt like a stranger's painting. Matthew stood at the far end, hands clasped, suit pressed sharp enough to cut. The same navy I'd bought him for his first investor pitch, back when he still looked at me like I hung the moon. Beside him, Samantha sat with a legal pad and a pen poised, already in official mode as if this was a board meeting instead of a family execution. A pitcher of water sat untouched. 3 glasses, a little tableau of civility. "Helen," Matthew said, trying for warmth. It landed rehearsed. I didn't sit. I rested my fingertips on the back of the nearest chair. The leather was cool, familiar, like proof I belonged here. Samantha gave me a sympathetic smile. "I'm really glad you came. I know this is a lot." A lot. Like my whole life's work was a scheduling conflict. "I'm here," I said evenly. "So tell me what couldn't be said downstairs." Matthew glanced at the skyline, at the glass wall, at anything but my face. Then he squared his shoulders the way he used to when he was a boy about to confess he'd broken something expensive. "We've been reviewing performance. The board's been talking," he said. "We're restructuring leadership. It's time the company evolves. Evolves. A polite knife. And with that," he continued, voice tightening, "we're making changes at the top." Samantha's pen clicked once. A small sound that cut through the room. Matthew swallowed. "We're asking you to step down as CEO." For a heartbeat, my brain refused to translate it. Asking. Step down. Soft words to pretend something brutal was gentle. "Step down," I repeated. "From the company I founded." "Mom," Matthew started. "Don't," I said, quieter than I meant. "Don't talk to me like I'm fragile." Samantha leaned forward, hands folded like prayer. "Helen, no one is denying what you built. You've earned the right to rest, to enjoy what you've created." The compliment was warm on the surface, greedy underneath. "I didn't build this to watch someone else wear it," I said. "It's not about taking anything," Matthew insisted. "Investors want to see modern leadership. Fresh energy." I saw the first office in my mind, 2 folding tables, a broken fan, contracts signed with hands that didn't shake even when my knees did. "And this was your idea," I said, already watching Samantha. Matthew hesitated just long enough. His eyes flicked to her, quick as a reflex. Samantha stepped in smoothly. "It was a joint decision. We're a team, and we really want you to have peace. No more stress. No more late nights. Just your life." My life. As if the company wasn't stitched through it like bone. "A title," I said, and my laugh sounded like paper tearing. "A plaque. A quiet corner where you can park me." "That's not fair," Matthew said, and his voice cracked with something like guilt. "No," I agreed, loosening my grip on the chair. "It isn't." I turned toward the door, posture straight, pulse steady. Too steady. Calm, I realized, was the most dangerous thing I could feel. "You want me out?" I said. "Fine. You can have the chair." Relief softened Matthew's shoulders. Samantha's pen moved recording, claiming. At the doorway, I looked back once. But understand this, I said, eyes locked on my son. You didn't build this. You're just sitting in it. I stepped into the hallway and my phone buzzed immediately. David Reynolds. Call me. They're pulling the old system files. Today. My hand froze around the phone, and the quiet anger in my chest finally woke up. David's text sat on my screen like a match held over gasoline. I didn't answer it in the hallway. Not yet. I kept walking, past the frosted glass offices and the polite nods that used to feel like respect. Now they felt like condolences people were afraid to offer out loud. My heels clicked across the marble, and I realized the building hadn't changed, only the way it looked at me. My office door still wore my name, Helen Mitchell CO. Someone had polished the plaque recently. That small, unnecessary shine tightened my throat more than the firing had. Inside, everything sat exactly where I'd left it. The leather chair angled toward the window. 2 framed photos Matthew at graduation. Maya missing a front tooth, holding a tinfoil trophy she'd made that said Grandma's boss. I stared a beat too long, like the pictures could argue my case for me. Then I moved. No tears. No slammed drawers. I refused to give them a scene they could retell as proof I'd lost it. I found a plain cardboard box from marketing and began packing with careful hands. Old client binders, my notebooks, contracts from the first lean years. Not for nostalgia, for control. People rewrite history the minute you stop guarding it. When I opened the bottom drawer, my stomach dropped. 2 black composition books were missing. The space they'd left was clean, like someone had lifted them gently and closed the drawer again. David's warning echoed. They're pulling the old system files. Today. In the hallway, voices drifted through the frosted glass. 2 analysts. Young, careless. Samantha already picked out new furniture. One whispered, almost excited. She's rebranding the whole executive floor. And HR said we have to start calling her Mrs. Mitchell in meetings, the other said. A pause. Then, quieter. Wasn't Helen Mrs. Mitchell? A soft laugh. Not anymore. I held still until the sound of their footsteps faded. Something inside me didn't break, it sharpened. The doorknob turned. Mark Stevens slipped in like a man approaching a funeral he wasn't sure he belonged at. His eyes didn't quite meet mine. Helen, he said softly. I'm sorry. I heard. Everyone heard, I replied. His gaze dropped to my box. They're moving fast. Samantha's been asking about access logs, old authorizations. Stuff no one touches unless they're planning to lock every door. How long? I asked. Your badge gets deactivated by end of day. Of course. Make it clean. Make it final. Mark swallowed. Are you going to fight this? I lifted the box against my hip. I am, I said evenly. Just not out loud. He glanced at the desk, then back at me. David mentioned you might be thinking about old systems. I slipped a faded, pre-biometric keycard into my pocket, an artifact most people forgot existed. They exist, I said, because I built this place to survive predators. Mark went pale. I stepped past him toward the door. Tell them I'm packing. Tell them I'm leaving peacefully. He nodded, unsure. In the elevator, I finally called David. He answered on the first ring. Helen, he said, voice tight. They're not just pulling files. The doors slid open onto the lobby's bright marble. What are they doing? I asked. David exhaled once. They're trying to prove you never had the right to build the code in the first place. I stayed in the lobby long enough for the air conditioning to bite through my blouse, long enough for the security desk to pretend they weren't watching me like a guest who'd overstayed her welcome. David's words kept circling my mind. They're trying to prove you never had the right to build the code in the first place. Outside, Miami's heat hit me like a slap. Valets moved luxury cars like chess pieces. People laughed about lunch plans. The world kept spinning, unconcerned that my son had just tried to erase me from my own history. I set the cardboard box in my trunk with the care you'd use for a casket. Then I sat behind the wheel and stared at my hands. Hands that had signed payroll when cash was thin. Hands that had steadied a company through storms. Hands like mine didn't deserve to be told to take it easy. I called David back. Where are you? Brickell, he said. My office. Side entrance. Don't use the garage cameras. His office was all clean lines and expensive restraint. He didn't offer tea. He shut the blinds first, then turned to me like we were back in the bad years again. "They're building a case," he said. "If they can paint you as reckless or unqualified, they can justify pushing you out permanently, not just from the chair, from the story." I sat, my spine straight. "Samantha?" I said. The name felt like metal on my tongue. David's mouth tightened. "And Matthew is letting her steer. He's choosing her," I corrected. Silence settled, heavy and familiar. Then I let myself drift back years ago, when we didn't have money for a full tech team. A rented office, a beige computer tower humming beside me while the city slept. I learned the system because I had to. I wrote the bones of it myself, contracts, approvals, client records, because I couldn't afford to outsource my survival. And because I'd spent my life in rooms where smiles hid knives, I built a founder's key into the infrastructure. Not a simple password, a pattern buried inside the way the system authenticated certain actions. Ordinary on the surface, impossible to see unless you knew the logic underneath. A lock inside the lock. David watched my face as I spoke. "You still have access," he said carefully. "I built a door they never knew existed," I replied. His gaze sharpened. "And you're thinking of using it." "My replacement is about to close an $8 million deal," I said. "The one she's bragging about." David's jaw flexed. "If you touch anything, the legal consequences—" "I know," I said, calm enough to scare even me. "Which is why I won't leave fingerprints." My phone buzzed. A calendar invite I hadn't created. Executive floor renovation walkthrough. Host, Samantha Mitchell. "They're not waiting for me to leave," I said softly. "They're replacing me while I'm still breathing." David's computer chimed with a new email, bold subject line glowing on his screen. "Notice of immediate access termination, Helen Mitchell." The email on David's screen sat there like a padlock slammed shut. "Notice of immediate access termination, Helen Mitchell." I didn't flinch. If they truly believed I was powerless, they wouldn't be rushing to seal every door. David warned me again about consequences, about narratives and paper trails. I listened, then stood. "No fingerprints," I said. "Not just legally, emotionally." I stopped feeding them any reaction they could weaponize. The next few days became a quiet discipline. At home, my estate felt too still. Every clock a countdown. I cleared my study desk like I was prepping for surgery. A yellow legal pad, 2 pens, and a list of names I hadn't needed in years, people who still remembered who paid their overtime, who covered their emergency leave, who didn't forget them when the company got big. I didn't ask anyone to break rules. I asked for weather reports. When Samantha scheduled an all-hands meeting, I heard the talking points before the email finished circulating. When legal pulled contract templates for expedited review, someone let it slip. When a vendor received a rush order for new signage on the executive floor, I got the whisper before the installer arrived. And then I did the part no one expected from a 78-year-old woman they'd tried to retire into silence. I seeded fog. A gentle call to an operations manager I'd mentored. "I'm hearing the incoming partner has a habit of demanding last-minute compliance documentation. Nothing dramatic, just make sure everything's spotless." A soft nudge to someone in client relations. "Permitting timelines in the city have tightened lately. I'd hate for anyone to get caught off guard." Not lies. Redirects. Shadows. Anything to keep their eyes busy while I stayed invisible. Meanwhile, Matthew performed confidence like it was armor. He posted a short video from the executive floor skyline behind him. Suit perfect. Voice full of innovation and new era. He never said my name, but I noticed the way his eyes kept flicking off camera, checking with someone before he spoke. Samantha, always just out of frame, always steering. On the third day, Mark texted, "I'm sorry I went quiet. I didn't know what to do. Can we talk?" I called him from my car, parked under palms where no one could overhear. "You don't have to apologize," I told him. "You have to decide who you are." His breath caught. "She's changing everything," he admitted. Samantha hired an outside cybersecurity firm. Forensic level. Ice slid under my skin at the word forensic. "And the deal?" I asked. He hesitated. They moved up the signing. Tomorrow morning. Penthouse conference room. Samantha called it a clean finish. I ended the call and sat very still. My window had just narrowed from days to hours. Then my phone buzzed with an automated alert from a pathway I recognized from years ago, an old system whisper that shouldn't have been speaking anymore. Authentication event detected, legacy pathway initiated. My pulse didn't race. It steadied. Because that message meant someone Samantha or her experts had touched my hidden door. And if they were rattling the handle tonight, tomorrow, they'd learn it wasn't just a door. Morning came too bright, like Miami wanted to pretend nothing ugly ever happened here. I'd barely slept. That alert, legacy pathway initiated, kept flashing behind my eyelids. The system's quiet way of warning me someone had gotten curious. At 6:30, I sat at my kitchen island with coffee I couldn't taste, and my laptop open to an interface that looked ordinary to anyone else. No skull icons, no drama, just the bones of a world I'd built. Mark texted at 7:12. They're here. Partner counsel plus compliance. Samantha is in white. Of course she was. Victory always looked like a wedding to her. At 7:46, Matthew just arrived. He looks excited, like he believes this ends today. Ends. Like cutting me out would close the book. I opened my private notebook, the one I'd never left in my office for anyone to steal. The founder's key wasn't a password. It was a path, a pattern buried in the system's logic, designed to look like routine maintenance unless you knew how the bones were connected. At 8:03, I touched the faded old keycard in my pocket, ridiculous and grounding all at once, then clicked into a legacy maintenance portal that shouldn't have still existed, except I'd built it to survive outages, vendors, hurricanes, and betrayal. The login screen didn't ask for my name. It asked for a pattern. My fingers moved with the calm of muscle memory. The system accepted it like an old dog recognizing the hand that raised it. A door opened without announcing it had swung. I didn't touch anything loud. No deletions, no explosions. Nothing Samantha's shiny forensic team could parade in front of the board. I made changes that would look clean until the moment they mattered. A date field adjusted so it no longer matched an attached exhibit's timestamp. A reference code in an appendix nudged so it pointed innocently to an outdated version. A signature block format altered just enough for compliance software to flag it as non-standard. Tiny threads pulled loose inside a suit that still looked perfect on the hanger. I hovered over the final confirmation and, against my will, saw Matthew at 8 years old in my first office, backpack too big, swearing he'd be the boss one day. I'd told him he could if he stayed honest. Then I pictured his eyes in that executive video, flicking off camera to Samantha like honesty was something he outsourced now. My finger came down. Update stored. No fireworks. No alarm. Just a clock starting. Mark texted at 8:38. Matthew is signing. Cameras are on. Everyone is smiling. I closed my laptop and listened to the quiet of my kitchen, imagining champagne and handshakes and Samantha's satisfied little laugh. At 9:11, my phone rang. David? Helen, he said, breath tight. The partners' compliance team ran the final package. Something flagged. Multiple inconsistencies. Not fatal yet, but enough to stop finalization. How long? I asked. Weeks, if they demand a full reissue. A beat. And Samantha just requested a forensic audit of every legacy access pathway. David's last sentence hung in my kitchen like smoke. A forensic audit, I repeated. Yes, he said. Papers shifted on his end, lawyer. Brain already building walls around a fire. They're calling it best practice after a compliance flag, but it's panic wearing a blazer. I stared at my closed laptop. Can they see what triggered the flags? They can see symptoms, David said. Not cause. Not yet. When we hung up, the sunlight on my countertop looked almost offensive in its calm. Then my phone began buzzing quiet little tremors from inside the company. Alicia. Contracts. Penthouse signing is paused. Partner counsel refusing to upload final packet. Samantha is furious but trying to smile. I pictured Samantha's smile bright, thin. A mask stretched too tight. Another buzz. Mark. Emergency meeting in 15. All VPs. Matthew looks like he's swallowing nails. A moment later, Mark called. He didn't speak at first. He let me hear the room. Chairs scraping. Low murmurs. Someone clearing their throat like they were about to announce a death. Then Matthew's voice cut through, sharper than I expected. I don't want theories. I want answers. Why did compliance flag this? A careful voice answered legal, maybe. There are inconsistencies in the packet. Minor, but the partner's system is strict. They won't proceed until it's clean. Minor? Matthew snapped. Then why aren't we signing? Samantha slid in, smooth but strained. Because they're overreacting. It's optics. They want to look diligent. A beat. Matthew again. Quieter. Dangerous. This deal was supposed to close today. It still can, Samantha said too quickly. We just need to reissue the documents and... And what? Matthew cut in. Reissue means delays. Delays mean the board asks questions. Someone else added, if the partner escalates to a full review, it could take weeks. Weeks. I felt the words settle like a weight on a trapdoor. In the background, Samantha's pen tapped faster now. Not orchestra conductor confident. Nervous metronome. Mark came back on the line, breath low. She's cracking, he whispered. She just asked it if there's any way you could still have access. I kept my voice even. What did it say? They repeated your access is terminated, Mark said. Samantha told them to prove it. Matthew's voice rose in the room. I want an internal review and an external audit. Today, I don't care what it costs. Samantha protested. We don't need outsiders digging around. Yes, we do, Matthew snapped. The first real split in their team. Because someone missed something, and I'm not walking into that board meeting empty-handed. The call went muffled, voices moving, doors opening. Mark's tone shifted like he'd stepped into a hallway. Helen, he said urgently, this is escalating. She's pulling legacy logs, names of anyone who ever had elevated access. She's talking about law enforcement if she finds tampering. I folded my hands, forcing my pulse to stay steady. Let them thrash, I said. You're not stopping? He whispered. This is the first ripple, I replied. When I ended the call, a new text arrived from an unknown number. Sam. It's security. Mrs. Mitchell, we found a legacy pathway still active. Samantha wants a meeting about it. Immediately. My thumb hovered over the screen. Because found could mean they'd noticed the door. Or that they'd stepped close enough to see what was waiting behind it. Sam's text kept glowing on my screen long after I set the phone face down. A meeting. Immediately. Like Samantha could summon me the way she summoned caterers. I replied with one line. I'm unavailable today. Put your questions in writing. Then I silenced my phone and watched the next wave hit them from a distance. The company had always been an organism. When something went wrong at the top, you felt it everywhere. Emails tightened. Calendars jammed. People stopped taking lunch like food might make them guilty. Mark fed me fragments as the days stacked up. Second crisis meeting. Samantha's pushing to power through. PR is drafting talking points, calling it a routine compliance delay. Matthew looks different. Like he's realizing this isn't a video. By the second day, the outside world started sniffing. A local business blogger posted a vague line about unexpected compliance hurdles at Mitchell Group. Then a small industry newsletter ran a cautious note about execution risk during leadership transition. Polite words, sharp teeth. Investors read those sentences like weather warnings. Mark called from what sounded like a stairwell, his voice thin with echo. Samantha wants to threaten the partner with walking away, he whispered. Threatening a partner during compliance is like yelling at a doctor mid-surgery, I said. I know, Mark breathed. But she's selling it as bold, strategic. Matthew's not buying it. That part should have satisfied me. It didn't. It felt like the slow click of a gear shifting into place. What's he saying? I asked. Mark hesitated. He asked legal if this could be tied to removing you. Like, did we things? You don't pull a foundation beam and act surprised when the ceiling creaks, I said. Mark swallowed. Samantha snapped at him. Told him doubt is toxic. People are whispering about personal liability now. Partner counsel is asking who reviewed what, who signed off. Personal liability, 2 words that turned executives into frightened children. That afternoon I met David again. Not at his office. Too obvious. A quiet restaurant, a private corner. He slid a folder across the table. "They're building a narrative," he said. "That you were removed for risk management. That your leadership created vulnerabilities. They're rewriting me into a hazard," I said. "They're trying," David corrected. "We protect you with paper. Timeline, formal statement. If Samantha calls law enforcement, we meet them with documentation." When I got home, Mark was in my driveway like he'd run out of safe places to stand. His tie was loosened, eyes bloodshot. "This is getting ugly," he said. "They're blaming everyone. And Matthew, he asked me today if firing you was a mistake." Mark stepped closer, voice pleading. "You should reach out. Call him before Samantha poisons him completely." For a moment, I saw my son at 8 years old, bright-eyed in my first office, promising he'd be worthy of what I built. Then I let the memory settle. "If I reach out now," I said softly, "he'll think he still gets to decide whether I matter." My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. Company line. Internal extension I knew by heart. Matthew. Matthew's name on my screen didn't feel like an invitation. It felt like a crack in a dam. I let it ring twice, just enough time to remind him I was no longer on command, then answered. "Hello." His voice came tight, stripped of warmth. "We need to meet. Not I want to talk. Not I'm sorry. Just need." Like I was a vendor he'd delayed paying. "Where?" I asked. "The office. Conference room. 1 hour." He said too fast. I could hear movement behind him, and under it, Samantha's tone controlled, impatient. 1 hour, I repeated. "And David will know I'm going. This is internal. It's my life," I said, keeping my voice level. "I'll be there." When I hung up, I didn't pace or spiral. I changed into the navy dress I wore when we landed our first major contract, simple lines, no softness. I pinned my hair the way I used to, the way that told a room I didn't need permission. Then I drove back to the building they'd tried to turn into a mausoleum. In the lobby, conversations dipped as I walked past. The security guard hesitated, hand hovering near the phone, then nodded like he was afraid refusing me would be a curse. The elevator carried me up in a hush. When the doors opened on the executive floor, I saw new signage mounted near the conference rooms. Mitchell Group, Executive Suite. Clean, modern, erased. No mention of me. Mark stood near the glass wall like he'd been stationed as a warning label. His eyes widened. "Helen," he whispered. "Please, be careful." I gave him a small nod. "Are they in there?" "Both," he said, and his jaw tightened. I opened the conference room door without knocking. Matthew stood at the head of the table, hands braced on the wood. His tie was slightly crooked, first imperfection I'd seen on him in years. Samantha sat beside him with a folder open like evidence. The water pitcher between them remained untouched, as if dehydration was the only danger in this room. Matthew's eyes snapped to mine. Whatever guilt he'd carried had hardened into accusation. "What did you do?" he demanded. I set my purse down in a chair and didn't sit. "Hello to you too." "Don't," he snapped. "The deal is stalled. Compliance flagged the packet. We're bleeding credibility by the hour and—" His jaw flexed. "You were the only variable that changed." Samantha's smile slipped into place, thin as paper. "It's not personal, Helen. It's an assessment. The timing is inconvenient." "Inconvenient," I repeated, tasting the word. "That's one way to describe being shoved out and blamed when your replacements can't perform." Matthew pointed at Samantha's folder. "We hired a forensic team. They found a legacy pathway still active. Don't insult me by pretending you don't know what that means." I met his stare and let silence stretch long enough to make him feel it. "I know what it means," I said. "I also know what you think it means." Samantha leaned forward, voice sharpening. "If you accessed company systems after termination, that's criminal." There it was, her favorite weapon. Not truth, fear. I nodded once. "You're saying a lot of words for someone who can't close an $8 million deal without turning a 78-year-old woman into a villain." Samantha's eyes narrowed. Matthew's nostrils flared. "This isn't about feelings," Samantha snapped. "It never is with you," I said, and the calm in my voice made her blink. Matthew's hand slammed the table. "Did you sabotage the deal?" I didn't answer the way he wanted. I looked past them to the skyline, Miami, glittering like it had no idea what was happening in this glass room, and then back to my son. "You fired me from the company I built," I said evenly, "and you called it restructuring. Like that makes it clean." His expression twitched pain, trying to surface, then getting shoved down by pride. Samantha's voice dropped. Cold. "You're avoiding the question." "I'm clarifying leverage," I said. I unzipped my purse and placed a faded pre-biometric keycard on the table between them. Outdated plastic. Harmless looking. Matthew frowned. "What is that?" "A reminder," I said softly. "I didn't just build a company. I built its skeleton. Its locks." Samantha stiffened. "You're threatening us." "I'm informing you," I corrected. "There are parts of this business you've never understood. And the moment you decided I was disposable, you forfeited the right to assume I would keep protecting you." Matthew swallowed. "Are you saying you still have access?" "I'm saying," I replied, leaning in, "you don't even know where the rot is. You only know you smell it." Matthew's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced down and the color drained from his face. Samantha leaned to see the screen, then looked up at me with a new, sharper kind of panic. Because the caller ID wasn't the board. It was the partner's lead counsel. Matthew stared at the phone like it had grown teeth. "Answer it," Samantha hissed, too quietly for anyone outside the room to hear. Her polished composure had a crack through it now, panic shining underneath. Matthew hit speaker. "Mitchell." The voice that came through was crisp and humorless. "Mr. Mitchell, Alan Pierce, counsel for Horizon Capital. We need to address the final packet immediately." Samantha leaned forward, her smile snapping on like a switch. "Mr. Pierce. Hi, this is Samantha Mitchell, CEO. I'm aware," Pierce cut in, not rude, just final. "This call is for Mr. Mitchell." Samantha's smile twitched. Matthew didn't look at her. "Go ahead." "We ran the submitted documents through compliance," Pierce said. "There are discrepancies, dates, references, exhibit alignment, signature formatting. Individually, correctable. Collectively, they indicate process failure. Process failure. The kind of phrase that makes money nervous. "We can reissue by end of day," Samantha said quickly. Pierce didn't bite. "You can reissue. But the issue is no longer the packet. The issue is your controls." Matthew's knuckles whitened on the table edge. "What are you saying?" "Horizon will not proceed under the current circumstances," Pierce replied. "We are pausing the transaction pending an assessment. Given the volume of inconsistencies, our risk committee is recommending we withdraw entirely." Samantha shoved her chair back with a screech. "Withdraw? That's not reasonable." "This is our fiduciary responsibility," Pierce said, voice unchanged. "You'll receive formal notice within the hour." Click. The line went dead. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Even Samantha's breathing seemed to shrink. Then she snapped her folder shut. "That's insane," she said, too loud, too raw. "They're bluffing. We call their managing partner. We push back." "They're not bluffing," Matthew said, low and flat. It startled me more than shouting would have. "This is sabotage," Samantha insisted, eyes flashing. "Which is exactly why I wanted the audit. Exactly why I said lock down legacy access. If you had listened—" "If I had listened?" Matthew's laugh was sharp and joyless. "You mean if I'd fired my mother faster?" Samantha went still. Then her face hardened. "Don't make this emotional." "It is emotional," Matthew shot back, voice cracking. "It's my mother. It's my company. It's—" He swallowed hard. "It's my mistake." The word landed like a dropped glass. Samantha's gaze snapped to me. "Did you do this?" Matthew looked at me too, but his eyes weren't pure accusation anymore. They were something worse, disbelief mixed with grief, like a child asking if the adult he trusted really let go of his hand. "Did you?" he demanded again. I let the silence do its work. "I didn't sign that deal," I said finally, calm as a metronome. You did, Samantha scoffed. Spare us the saint routine. I kept my eyes on my son. You wanted fresh leadership, I said. You got it. And the moment the air got thin, the people you were trying to impress decided you weren't worth the oxygen. Matthew flinched as if I'd struck him. His shoulders sagged, and suddenly he looked 34 and exhausted, and far too young to be carrying an empire he hadn't respected. His phone buzzed, then buzzed again, emails stacking up like dominoes. I didn't need to see the screen. Investor questions. PR panic. Board chatter. Mark slipped into the room, pale and sweating. Matthew, he said, voice shaking. 3 investors just requested an emergency call. And PR says the rumor post got picked up. It's spreading. Samantha spun on him. Why are you letting this leak? I'm not, Mark stammered. People talk. Matthew stared at the table. They're pulling back, he whispered. All of them. Samantha's voice sharpened with desperation. No, we control this. We release a statement. We threaten legal action if anyone. You're going to make it worse, Matthew cut in. And there was something in his tone I hadn't heard in years. Clarity. Samantha froze. Excuse me? Matthew turned on her. Every time something goes wrong, you swing harder. You threaten. You don't even realize you're why people don't trust us. Her mask slipped. This is not on me. It's not on Mom either, he snapped, and his eyes flicked to me again, pleading now. Is it? I picked up my purse slowly. I didn't need to gloat. The wreckage was doing that for me. You wanted reality without me, I said softly. Now you have it. I walked out. Behind me, Samantha's voice rose sharp, frantic, while Matthew's came back lower, darker, pushing back at last. In the hallway, my phone vibrated with a new email from the board. Subject line: Emergency board session founders' presence required. The subject line sat in my inbox like a summons carved in stone. Emergency board session founders' presence required. I didn't go home. I didn't give myself time to soften. I stepped into a quiet alcove off the executive hallway and called David. He answered on the first ring. They called you, he said. They need me, I replied. I'm coming, he said. Where? Boardroom, I said. Not the penthouse, I want witnesses. 20 minutes later, the boardroom lights were too bright, and the air smelled faintly of lemon polish, like someone had tried to scrub away panic. The long walnut table gleamed. Miami's skyline watched through glass. Chairman Caldwell rose as I entered. Helen, thank you for coming. I didn't build this company to be invited to it, I said, taking my seat without asking. David arrived and sat beside me, folder in hand. Directors filled in quickly controlled faces, expensive restraint. Mark hovered near the back, pale. Then Matthew and Samantha walked in. Matthew's shoulders looked heavier than they had a week ago. Samantha's chin was lifted. Her dress, black like mourning, turned into strategy. Her gaze landed on me, daring me to blink. Caldwell rapped his knuckles once. We've received formal notice that Horizon has withdrawn. Matthew cleared his throat. We're pursuing alternatives. This is a setback, not a setback that triggered 3 investor calls before noon. A director cut in. We need to know if leadership has control of risk. Samantha leaned forward, voice smooth. We do. This is exactly why we initiated a forensic audit. We're addressing legacy vulnerabilities. Your messaging is already failing, the woman director said calmly. 2 analysts requested interviews. That's not control. That's an alarm. Samantha's smile tightened. With respect, I've been handling this. And with respect, another director replied. The deal fell apart under your handling. Caldwell turned to me. Helen, can we stabilize quickly? I can stabilize, I said, but not as an ornament. A murmur slid around the table. Matthew's eyes dropped, then lifted again, raw. Mom, Helen, I'm sorry. The word came late, like rain after the crops are gone. I believe you mean it, I said quietly. But belief doesn't rebuild trust. Caldwell steepled his fingers. If we reinstate you as CEO, can you steady the company within 30 days? Yes, I said. With conditions. Samantha snapped. Conditions? Clear authority, I said, not looking at her. Immediate pause on outside audits until I review scope. And an interim restriction on executive decision-making, meaning Matthew and Samantha step away from operational control while governance is restored. Samantha's face flushed. You can't do that. I'm the CEO appointed by him. The board appoints leadership, Caldwell said evenly. And the board is losing confidence. He lifted a hand. We'll vote. Hands rose one by one, fast, surgical. Caldwell counted, then spoke. The motion carries. Effective immediately, Helen Mitchell is reinstated as CEO. Matthew stared at his hands. Samantha didn't move, but her eyes burned. Caldwell met my gaze. Address the company within the hour. I nodded. And as the meeting broke, Samantha glanced at her buzzing phone, then looked up with a tight, dangerous calm. She wasn't defeated. She was calculating. After the vote, I walked back to my old office, and stopped in the doorway like I was meeting a former version of myself. The room felt disturbed, like someone had slept in your bed with their shoes on. My nameplate was gone. A vase of white orchids sat where my framed photos used to be. Expensive and bloodless. Mark hovered behind me. Have facilities remove that? I said, nodding at the orchids. Yes, ma'am, he replied, and the formality landed like a bruise and a balm. Within the hour, the company gathered in the auditorium. I stepped to the podium without notes, hands steady. My name is Helen Mitchell, I said. As of this morning, I have resumed my role as CEO. A ripple moved through the room. Relief, shock, guarded calculation. I won't pretend the past week didn't happen, I continued. It did. And we will address it with professionalism, with discipline, and with truth. Truth. The word quieted the room. I'm instituting an immediate governance reset, I said. No unilateral decisions. No public statements without review. No external audits without my approval and legal oversight. Heads lifted. Pens appeared. The building's nervous system started listening again. And finally, I added, sweeping the room with my eyes, this company will not be run by fear. Not fear of investors, not fear of headlines, and not fear of one another. Applause rose in pockets, then spread. It wasn't adoration. It was oxygen returning. Back upstairs, David had paperwork ready. I signed interim authority, a communications freeze, and a temporary limitation on executive actions. Names included. Matthew Mitchell. Samantha Mitchell. Ink made it real. Late afternoon, Mark appeared at my door. They're outside, he said carefully. Matthew and Samantha. They want time. Send them in, I said. They entered like they were walking into court. Matthew first, eyes red-rimmed, hands empty. Samantha behind him, posture perfect, anger disguised as dignity. My photos were back on the shelf, Matthew at graduation. Maya with her tinfoil trophy, quiet witnesses. Matthew cleared his throat. I'm sorry, he said rough. I was arrogant. I didn't see what I was throwing away. Samantha inhaled sharply, then forced her voice smooth. We want to move forward. As a family. As leadership. Forgiveness isn't a transaction, I said. You don't request it like a meeting room. Samantha's eyes narrowed. You humiliated us? No, I replied softly. I reclaimed what I built. Matthew swallowed. Is there any way back? The company needs strong leadership, I said. And strong leadership includes consequences. Trust is broken. Samantha's jaw tightened. So we're sidelined? You're protected, I corrected. Consider that mercy. Matthew nodded, small and chastened. Samantha said, Too crisp? Fine. We'll comply. Comply like a promise she'd challenge later. As they turned to leave, Matthew paused. Do you still love me? I kept my posture firm, but my voice lowered. Love isn't the problem, I said. Respect is. He nodded and walked out. Samantha followed, phone buzzing in her hand. She glanced at the screen, and her jaw tightened, calculating, not grieving. The week after I took my chair back, the company felt like a house after a hurricane standing, but full of hidden leaks. People smiled too hard. Emails got forwarded to too many recipients. Every meeting began with someone clearing their throat like they were asking permission to breathe. I didn't chase blame. I chased structure. By Monday morning, I'd stripped vision sessions and brand refresh, calls off the executive calendar, and replaced them with three things that actually matter when money is nervous: controls, clarity, and credibility. David drafted the governance reset into language no one could misread. Mark coordinated quietly, grateful for orders that weren't fueled by panic. Matthew sat through those meetings like a man relearning gravity. He didn't interrupt. He took notes. He watched the way I asked questions that forced reality into the room: cash flow, risk posture, decision rights, things that don't photograph well but keep a company alive. Samantha attended because she had to. Her posture stayed perfect, but her ideas smelled like optics. "We should get ahead of this with a profile," she said once, tapping a glossy printout. "A story about our resilience." "No," I replied, calm. "We don't sell resilience. We demonstrate competence." Her eyes flicked to Matthew for backup. He didn't give it. 2 days later, my phone rang with a private line I hadn't used in years, one of our old institutional backers. The kind of man who never wasted words. "Heard there was turbulence," he said. "There was," I answered. "And it's contained." A low chuckle. "Send me the revised deck. If you're rebuilding, I want in early." That call opened another. Then another. Old relationships are steel. If you didn't cheapen them, they don't rust. Within 10 days, I had a short list of partners who didn't require smoke to feel confident. Not Horizon's exact structure, but close enough to revive the expansion plan and keep investors from bolting. We didn't call it a replacement deal. We called it what it was: a better one. The new group met us in the main boardroom, not the penthouse. Matthew sat 2 seats away from me, quiet. Samantha sat beside him, mouth set like she was swallowing words. After scanning the packet, the lead investor looked up. "Your controls are unusually tight," he said. "Cleaner than most firms your size." "That's because I prefer growth earned," I replied. He nodded. "We can work with that." Later, Mark exhaled like he'd been underwater. "They're excited," he whispered. "They're relieved," I corrected. Relief is what money buys. That evening, I picked Maya up from school. She climbed in, hair half undone, talking about a science project. Then she grew serious. "Mom says you're the boss again." "I'm working," I said gently. "Are you mad at Daddy?" she asked. The question hit the softest place in me. "I'm not mad," I said. "I'm disappointed. And he's learning." Maya nodded, then held out her pinky. "Can you teach me?" I smiled, small, real. "If you promise to ask good questions." Back at the office, my phone buzzed with a governance alert. Unauthorized request. Executive access reinstatement user S. Mitchell status. Pending. I stared at it, then called Mark. "Lock it down," I said quietly. "And don't tell her you saw it." Because Samantha hadn't stopped. She'd just changed tactics. The unauthorized access request didn't explode. It hissed. That was the thing about real danger in a company. If it's loud, you can point at it. If it's quiet, it can live in the walls for years. Mark did exactly what I told him. He locked it down, documented the attempt, and most importantly, kept his mouth shut. Not because I wanted secrecy for its own sake, but because Samantha's favorite skill wasn't leadership. It was adapting. If she knew we'd seen her hand, she'd change the game before we could trap the pattern. 2 weeks later, the new partnership moved from promising to inevitable. The revised terms were better than Horizon's in all the ways that mattered. Cleaner governance, tighter compliance expectations, and investor patience that didn't rely on polished speeches. They weren't buying a fantasy. They were buying an engine. The morning we closed, I arrived early before the attorneys, before the assistants laid out water glasses like props. The boardroom was empty. The skyline washed in pale gold. I stood at the head of the table for a moment and let the quiet settle into my bones. Not triumph, not revenge. Ownership. David came in with a folder tucked under his arm. "They're on their way," he said, eyes sharp. "And Helen Press is downstairs." "Good," I said. "Let them watch us do it properly." Matthew arrived next. He looked different lately, like he'd stopped trying to fill my silhouette and started trying to find his own shape. He carried a notebook, no phone in his hand. That alone told me he'd learned something. "Morning," he said carefully. "Morning," I replied, and we let that be enough. Samantha appeared last. She wore white again, almost daring the universe to repeat history. Her smile was there, but it didn't reach her eyes. Those eyes tracked the room the way a gambler tracks exits. She sat without greeting me, crossing her legs with precise control. The investors filed in with their counsel and analysts, polite and unreadable. Paper rustled. Laptops opened. The kind of ritual people mistake for power. We reviewed the final pages. The lead investor, Mr. Klein, looked up at me over his glasses. "This structure gives us confidence," he said. "Founder-led governance is rare now. It's stabilizing." Samantha's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly at the words founder-led. David slid the signature page toward me. The pen felt warm in my fingers. I signed first, clean and steady. Then the investor. Then board countersignatures. When the last signature dried, something subtle happened in the room. Shoulders dropped. People exhaled. The deal wasn't just closed. The fear was. Applause started, not the theatrical kind, but the relieved kind. Mark, standing near the back, looked like he might cry and didn't know if he was allowed to. Matthew stared at the signed page as if it might disappear. Then he looked at me, and his voice came out low. "You didn't just save it," he said. "You rebuilt it." I met his gaze. "That's what founders do," I replied, "when they're not being pushed out of their own house." His throat worked. I was wrong. He didn't add excuses. That was new. That was progress. Samantha stood. As soon as the room began to break, smoothing her dress like she could iron humiliation out of fabric. "Congratulations," she said to the investors, her voice perfectly sweet. Then her eyes slid to me. "Enjoy your victory." I watched her for a beat. "I will," I said simply. Major twists Xinghao the lock becomes permanent power shift. As the council collected documents, David leaned in and murmured, "Page 42. I flipped to it without moving my face. There it was. A governance clause embedded in the partnership, quiet, surgical, irreversible. A founder's golden share structure. One vote that could override executive appointments and block any attempt to remove founder authority without unanimous board approval. And beneath that, the succession language. If I became incapacitated or chose to step back, the golden share transferred into a trust not to Matthew, to Maya, my granddaughter. I had insisted on it during negotiations, and David had made sure it was airtight. Not because I wanted to punish my son, because I'd watched him choose the wrong compass too easily. Across the table, Samantha's eyes flicked to the open page in front of David. She'd seen it too. For the first time since I'd met her mask cracked completely. It wasn't anger. It was the realization of a locked door. A door she couldn't sweet-talk, threaten, or pry open. Later, when the press asked for comments in the lobby, I didn't give them drama. I gave them direction. "We're expanding," I said into the microphones, calm and clear. "Not recklessly. Internationally, deliberately. We'll be opening operations in 2 new markets over the next year. Our reputation will be built on execution, not noise." That quote ran everywhere by afternoon. And the invitations started almost immediately. Leadership panels, business schools, women's executive forums. People love a comeback story, especially when it comes with receipts. That evening, Matthew knocked on my door again. Not desperate this time. Respectful. "I want to rebuild my career," he said. "Not by taking from you, by earning something beside you. Tell me where to start." I studied him, really studied him, and felt something in my chest loosen, just slightly. "You start," I said, "by learning patience, and by understanding that legacy isn't a crown. It's a responsibility." He nodded, like he was finally ready to carry weight instead of chasing shine. Down the hall, Samantha walked past my open doorway without looking in. Her heels struck the floor in perfect rhythm, but her shoulders were stiff with contained fury. As she disappeared around the corner, Mark stepped in, closing the door behind him. "Helen," he said quietly. It flagged something else. He held up a printout, an audit trail. Not the access request. A second attempt, routed through an external device, timed just minutes after the deal closed. And the username attached wasn't Samantha's. It was Matthew's. Mark's printout felt heavier than paper should. A neat audit trail. Time-stamped, routed through an external device. And the username stamped across it like a signature. Matthew. I kept my face still. Panic is contagious, and I'd spent months disinfecting this building. "Where did it originate?" I asked. Mark swallowed. "Off-network, like someone tried to authenticate from outside using stored credentials." "Did it succeed?" "No," he said quickly. "Blocked at the governance layer you put in." "But, Helen, it's his username. Bring David," I said. "And don't let this leave this room." When Mark slipped out, I stared at the skyline and felt that familiar cold precision settle behind my ribs. The deal had closed. The golden share was locked into Maya's trust. On paper, my legacy was secure. But paper is only as strong as the people holding it. I called Matthew and told him to come to my office alone. He arrived fast, breath shallow, eyes wary like a man walking into a consequence he deserved but still hoped to negotiate. I held the printout up without speaking. The color drained from his face. "Mom, Helen, he started. "Don't lie," I said, calm and absolute. "Not now. Not to me." He stepped forward, hands open as if showing me they were empty. "I didn't do it," he said. "I swear. I was in the hallway after the closing. Samantha, she grabbed my laptop. She said she needed to check something. She told me you'd hidden a trap in the system and this was the only way to prove it. And you let her?" I said. Shame rolled over him in a visible wave. "I didn't want another fight," he whispered. "And I thought if I showed her there was nothing, she'd stop." I let the silence stretch until it pressed against his skin. "You offered your keys to a woman who has never accepted the word stop," I said quietly. His eyes glistened with fury at himself. "I'm trying," he said. "I'm trying to be better." "I believe you're trying," I replied. "But trying doesn't protect a company. Discipline does." He nodded, jaw tight. "Tell me what to do." I slid the printout into a folder and closed it like a casket lid. "From this moment, your credentials are reset and governed," I said. "You don't share them. You don't leave devices unlocked. You don't make choices to keep peace at home that create war at work." He flinched but didn't argue. "And Samantha?" he asked, voice low. "Samantha is no longer in control," I said. "She can contribute without steering or she can learn what it feels like to be irrelevant." Matthew swallowed. "She'll hate me." I held his gaze. "Then, let her." After that, the shift wasn't dramatic. It was gravitational. I didn't fire Samantha. I wasn't interested in spectacle. I moved her into a role that sounded prestigious and held no leverage. External relations and the charitable arm she'd always treated like a photo backdrop. She smiled for cameras, cut ribbons, posted quotes about resilience, but she wasn't driving anything anymore. Matthew did the unglamorous work. Governance reviews, operations shadowing, listening without defending. It wasn't redemption. It was training. While they recalibrated, I expanded deliberately. 2 new markets opened under strict controls. Regional teams built for stability, not flash. Every time someone suggested speed over structure, I gave the same answer. We're building something that outlives applause. Recognition followed. Quiet at first, then louder. A business magazine wanted a cover story. A leadership conference asked me to keynote. On stage, under bright lights, I told the truth without turning it into revenge. They wanted to retire me. They forgot I built the system they were trying to inherit. At home, the victories were smaller. Maya started spending afternoons in my office. Homework on the side table, questions in her eyes. "Why do people lie when they're scared?" she asked once. "Because the truth costs more," I told her, "and not everyone is willing to pay." Months passed steady growth, controlled power, my influence widening while Matthew and Samantha faded into the background of the story they'd tried to rewrite. Then one night, alone on the executive floor, I let myself feel something close to peace until my phone lit up with a message from Maya's iPad, voice to text and accidental. Grandma, Mom says you can't keep the company forever. She says there's a way to fix the trust if Daddy signs something. Is that true? My fingers went still because Samantha wasn't trying to get access anymore. She was trying to get around me through my son, through my granddaughter, through paper. And that meant the endgame had moved into my family. Maya's message sat on my screen like a small handprint in wet cement. I didn't answer it right away, not because I didn't care, but because the wrong answer could plant fear in her where none belonged. 10-year-olds don't need to carry corporate war in their backpacks. Instead, I called David. He didn't say hello. I saw the trust language again this morning, he said, like he'd been thinking the same thing. What's happened? Maya heard something, I told him. Samantha is talking about fixing the trust if Matthew signs something. David exhaled once. There is no legal fix unless someone tries to manufacture one, which means Samantha is either bluffing or drafting. I want eyes on every document that crosses Matthew's desk, I said. And I want a family meeting with you present. David paused. Helen, I'm not asking, I said softly. I'm ending this. We met the next afternoon in my home library, the one room in the house that still smelled like old paper and decisions. Sunshine fell in clean rectangles across the Persian rug. The calmness was almost cruel. Matthew arrived first, alone. No, Samantha. That was a relief and a warning. He looked older than he should, like the months had finally charged him interest for every shortcut he'd taken. Mom, he said, I'm not here to punish you, I replied. I'm here to protect Maya. His face tightened. She told you, she asked me. I corrected. Because she trusts me. Don't make me regret that. Matthew swallowed, nodding. Then Samantha arrived, 15 minutes late on purpose. She entered like she was stepping onto a stage, perfectly dressed, perfectly composed, carrying a leather portfolio that looked too new to be innocent. David stood when she walked in. His presence made her smile freeze for half a second. Counsel? She said lightly. Accountability, I replied, and gestured to the chair across from me. Samantha sat, crossing her legs with controlled elegance. If this is about Maya, I agree she shouldn't be involved, which is why you should stop using her as a shield. I didn't react to the jab. Maya isn't a shield, I said. She's a child, and you used her name in a sentence about a trust. Samantha's eyes flashed. I said there were options. That's not illegal. David opened his folder. Threatening to subvert a trust arrangement through coercion would be, he said calmly. Samantha's smile sharpened. Coercion? Please. I'm trying to keep this family from being held hostage by an elderly woman with a grudge. Matthew flinched like she'd slapped me. He looked at her, then at me, helpless. That helplessness, the habit of surrendering the moment pressure arrived, was the true wound she'd exploited. I leaned forward. You don't get to call me elderly like it's a weakness, I said quietly. You used my son's fear of conflict like a crowbar, and you almost used my granddaughter's future the same way. Samantha lifted her chin. I'm married into this family. I have a right to— No, I cut in. Not loud, final. You married into a name. You didn't marry into ownership. She opened her portfolio and slid a document across the coffee table like a knife placed gently on linen. Then let's talk ownership, she said. The title at the top made Matthew's breath catch. Postnuptial agreement, amendment, and acknowledgement. David's eyes skimmed it once, then hardened. This is drafted to pressure Matthew into contesting the trust by claiming undue influence, he said. Samantha's voice stayed smooth. It's a precaution. If Helen is manipulating him, he deserves protection. Matthew stared at the paper, then looked at Samantha, bewildered. You told me this was for clarity. It is, she snapped, and the mask slipped. Clarity that you're not going to spend your life kneeling to her. Clarity that our daughter, our family, won't be left begging when she decides to punish us. Matthew's jaw tightened. Maya isn't— You see? Samantha cut him off, turning her frustration into fuel. You still don't get it. She'll always choose control over you. Matthew looked at me, then lost, aching. Is that true? He asked, like the question had been living in his throat for months. I didn't soften the truth to make him comfortable. Comfort had been the enemy. I chose stability over your ego, I said. I chose the company over your impulsiveness. And I chose Maya's future over your wife's ambition. If you need to call that control, you can. But don't confuse boundaries with cruelty. Something broke open in Matthew's face, not anger, but a kind of clarity that looked like grief. He slid the paper back toward Samantha. I'm not signing this, he said. Samantha went still. Matthew? No, he repeated, stronger. I'm done being used as a tool. I'm done letting you point me at my mother like a weapon. For a heartbeat. The library was silent, except for the faint tick of the grandfather clock. Samantha's eyes sharpened into something cold. Then you're choosing her. Matthew's voice trembled, but it held. I'm choosing myself. For the first time. David quietly gathered the document. We will retain this, he said. For the record. Samantha stood abruptly, chair legs scraping. She looked at me with a hatred so clean it almost felt honest. You think you've won, she said. I did, I replied calm. And you helped me. Her mouth tightened, but she had no move left that didn't expose her. She left without another word, the door closing behind her with a soft, final click. Matthew sank onto the couch as if his body had been holding him upright on stubbornness alone. I'm sorry, he whispered. I walked to the window, looking out at my garden, where the sun made everything look gentle. Sorry is a beginning, I said, not an eraser. Behind me, he breathed in shakily. What happens now? Now, I said, turning back. We build the kind of future that doesn't depend on anyone's mood. In the months that followed, I did exactly that. I tightened governance until it could withstand ego. I promoted people who chose integrity over theater. I opened doors for women who'd been told they were too much. And I taught them the same lesson I'd had to learn alone. You don't ask for space, you claim it, and then you do the work that justifies it. And I taught Maya, gently, patiently, the difference between power and love. Power, I told her, is what you can take. Love is what you protect. One evening, Maya sat beside me in my office, swinging her feet, asking a question that made my heart swell. Grandma, she said, how do you know when someone is trying to control you? I smiled and brushed a stray hair from her forehead. When they want you smaller, I said, and when they get angry the moment you stand up. Outside, Miami glittered. Inside, my company ran clean and steady, not because I crushed people, but because I stopped letting them crush me. They thought they could control me, but I built something they'll never take away.